Ayland, I'm so excited to talk to you. One, because I've done a little bit of stalking. I've seen your documentary. I've seen your story. But two, we have a mutual friend, Joe Stewart.
Yes.
And he's just like, Phil, you got to talk to Ayland. You got to talk to Ayland, Phil. And we both know Joe. Joe's a talker. Like
Yep.
he has a lot to say, Joe does. And so I was like, yeah, cool. I'll put him on my list. And then all of a sudden I had other people reaching out saying, hey, Phil, I got a guy for you with an incredible story. His name's Ayland. Like, okay, it's Ayland coming on the radar again. And I had another email, and I was just like, okay, it is time.
It's time.
It is time to sit down and talk to Ayland. And man, I'm excited to hear from you, your story in your own words. It's just an incredible story.
Yeah.
So let's start, I think, at the beginning.
Okay.
Tell me about your mom.
My mom was, my mom, I love my mom to death. She was a good mom. Me and her were very close. I just loved her more than anything in the world. Believed anything she said to me. I just loved her to death. But she had a kind of a wild hair. She liked to hang out with her friends and stuff like that. And she had left the house relatively young, about 15 is when she started getting into issues and stuff like that. And she started partying, and she ended up getting hooked on heroin. And she got pregnant with me. And the interesting thing about my mom is when she found out she was pregnant, out of all that partying she was doing, when she found out she was pregnant with me, she stopped everything she was doing, and she went home. She went back to my grandma's house, and she stayed put until after she had me. And shortly after she had me, she was back out on the streets again. Oh, wow. And she took me with her, everywhere she went, she had me. I don't know the reason for that. But everywhere she went, and that's ultimately the reason why I was placed in foster care, because she didn't want to take me in certain environments, so she would drop me off over at people's houses that she knew, and she, hey, I'll be back. I just got to make a grocery run. Can you watch my son? And and they wouldn't see her for hours and sometimes days, and one day she left me with someone, and sure enough, she didn't come back for quite a while, and the person decided to take me over to my grandmother's house, sat me on the porch, and jumped in the car and sped off.
Wow.
Yeah. I was 2 years old at the time, and my grandmother says that she heard the car speeding off, and my grandmother lived on it's kind of a dead-end street. You go down the street and you go around this circle where we played kickball, and then you go back out in the street. So it was very uncommon for a car to speed off like that. It was a lot of kids on the block. And so she went out there, and there I was. She went to go see what was going on out in the street, and I was sitting there on the porch.
Was there ever a conversation between you and your mom about her giving you to the foster care system, or no?
That was later on in life, and I think you've seen that in my documentary where I was looking for answers from my mom. Yeah. And that was the last argument, or that was the last conversation we had together. We got into a huge argument, and tempers was flying, and I said a lot of things to her, that I hated her, and that, as far as I was concerned, she was dead to me. I never wanted to see her again, and those were my last words to her. And she passed a year later.
Well, we'll come back to that story when we kind of move through the timeline. And this is down in Inkster, correct?
Yes.
You grew up in Inkster. Can you tell me a little bit about the community that you had grown up with kind of outside of your home?
The community of Inkster?
Yeah.
So it was a lot of, back then, 70s, I'm kind of telling on myself.
You said it, I didn't.
Just realized I just told on myself. But back then there was a lot of block parties, shut down whole blocks, and DJ would come out there and they'd have parties, a lot of disco music. It was a lot about family. It was just, as far as I remember, it was a good time, but there was a lot of drugs around there, at that time. The liquor stores were packed all the time. There was streetwalkers and everything like that. Inkster is, I would say, the whole city is kind of hood. You have some parts that are better than others, but the whole city at that time was kind of, kind of one of those cities.
So you're in a tough situation at home, tough situation outside the community as well.
Yeah,
and what age did you officially enter the foster care system?
I officially entered 3 days after I was dropped off.
Wow.
Yeah. My grandmother says that a CPS worker, Child Protective Service worker, had knocked on her door 3 days later looking for my mom and looking for me. They knew I was safe because they knew, where the person said where they dropped me off, but they were looking for my mom to see, hey, what's going on with you? Why are you neglecting your kid? And why was this kid left by, with someone? That was when I was 2, I was placed into foster care.
Do you remember anything about those initial, I mean, you were 2, but do you remember anything about that initial transition into the foster care system?
I don't remember anything about the day that the social worker came by, the CPS worker. I don't remember that. But I do remember 6 years later, when I had that temper tantrum on Christmas night. It was my last temper tantrum that I had. My mother didn't show up for Christmas. I was looking for her. She didn't show up like she had promised. And I just had a huge temper tantrum, and I'd say things like, I want to die, I want to kill myself, and all that kind of stuff. And I was throwing myself against the wall, banging my head on the floor. And my grandmother would do the usual restrain and try to grab my head first and make sure I didn't, do too much to my head. And, in the midst of that, I swung and I hit her in the mouth, busted her lip. There was blood everywhere. And she went and called the police, and the police came and grabbed me because I was still throwing stuff in the house, and came and grabbed me and restrained me, had me down for a little bit until I calmed down. And then he put me in the back of the police car, and I sat there for a while, and they were talking inside of the house. And next thing I know, he came out and, he told me, he said, if you don't calm down, I'm going to have to take you to prison. And, at that time I was scared. I didn't know he could take me to prison, but I was scared. And so I calmed down, and, he took me back in the house. He had a few more words for me, and I just kind of chilled out. But later that night, my grandmother had got me all packed up and took me to my first boys' home. It was Christmas night. It was called St. Francis Home for Boys, a huge facility in Detroit.
Wow. Do you remember in that moment when she had packed your stuff up and here you are at this boys' facility? Do you remember grasping the gravity of what had just happened, or were you still fired up from your mom not showing up, or like what are you feeling in that?
I know that it appeared to be a very long ride. There, I was in the back seat. My grandmother she was quiet. And I just remember it being at night. It was dark. When I got there, I didn't know really what was going on, but I heard a lot of boys yelling, and some of them were laughing, some of them were crying. It's Christmas night. And there were plainclothes staff walking around, as well as some nuns. It was a Catholic boys' home facility. So there were some nuns walking around in their traditional outfits. And I just remember I remember just being really confused. I remember being angry. I remember not knowing where I was at. I remember it just being a really dark night, a really dark time. Although the staff were trying to make me feel better, when my grandmother took me in, I was having a real issue with her leaving me there. And so I remember the staff, grabbing me and pulling me away as my grandmother was walking off, because I didn't know where I was at. And I had been in trouble before. I've done things before. Right. I used to get in trouble a lot at school. And
this is way different than a principal's office.
Yeah. And I had never been dropped off somewhere like this before. So.
Have you talked to your grandma since about what she was feeling during that night, what her perspective was?
She said that she felt really bad about it, but she knew that she couldn't handle me anymore. Her main thing was, she was like, you were too big. I couldn't restrain you no more. You got too strong.
As a 2-year-old, you can throw a tantrum, but as a big 8-year-old, then now she's in danger.
Yeah, and she was saying, it was sad for her, but she was also a single mom, working at the University of Michigan Hospital 12 hours a day. And, and here I am, this kid having problems all the time at school, her constantly getting called and, or my aunt and uncle, my aunt having to leave her class to come down to my class to get me to calm down. And, it was just a lot that she had to deal with that she couldn't take anymore.
Right. So you're 8 years old. You're living at this boys' facility. Do you remember how many other boys were there?
It seemed like a lot. I can't really put a number on it.
Are we talking like more than 100?
Oh, no, I think it was more, maybe like 15 or 20 other kids there.
Still a crew. Yeah, that's a lot of kids. And this 8 years old, this started a decade in the foster care system. Is that correct? Until you were 18 and aged out? Mm-hmm. What was your experience like in the foster care system?
A lot of it was an emotional roller coaster.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, it was an emotional roller coaster.
How many different homes were you in?
I was in 20 different placements.
Wow.
Yeah, that I can remember.
Over the course of 10 years, you were in 20 different placements.
Yeah.
Wow.
And a lot of that had to do with my behavior, just being honest and transparent. I was a good kid all the way around. I wanted things a certain way. I wanted to be with my mom. And the 20 different placements came from, whenever there's an episode or removal is what we call it, you get removed and then you're put a lot of times in a temporary placement for 30 days, 60 days, a couple weeks sometimes, until DHS figures out where they're going to put you for a longer term. And then you go from there to another placement, like a residential placement, depending on your behavior. Most kids they're going through the stages of grief because they've lost their parent. The parent's not dead, but they lost them, so they're going through the stages of grief, which is a lot of different behaviors. There's anger, there's depression, there's all that. And so those things have to be managed, and monitored. And so you go to a facility for that. And then once your behaviors are managed and they get you stabilized, then they put you in a foster home. That's the hope. So there you go. That's 3 placements right there. Yeah. And then, my mother was an addict. So she would get herself together and get clean for a while. And then I would get placed back with her, still under foster care, until they figure out if this is going to last. And then my mother would relapse. And then you go through the whole stage of grief again, and then you got 3 more placements. Now, for me, where it became more than that, like I said, I was a decent kid, so I would go to these residentials and I would bomb the program. I mean, I would kill it. You know, I'd go in there and I'd be this good kid. I knew the staff. I knew they came in 8 hours a day, and I knew the whole system of that. But then after your behavior is so good for a while, they can't keep you there. So they place you in a foster home. That's where things didn't work out for me, because now I'm in a foster home and I'm with a family. I have no point of reference on what a stabilized family is. You know, at that point, I can't handle the love of the foster parents. You know, I don't really know what that looks like. They want to be my mom and dad. And then there's a sense of, am I betraying my mom by getting close to these people? There's also that sense of, if I get too close to these people, are they going to hurt me?
Right.
So, you know, it's like all of this fear. So I started doing things subconsciously to self-sabotage the situation. And then I've ran away, and I've you know, thrown temper tantrums when I didn't get my way or whatever. Now I've escalated back up to residential. So now I'm back in a residential facility. My behavior gets under control. I go to a foster home. So it was a lot of that going on. Yeah.
I mean, there's so much to kind of unpack with that, especially this idea of something that you say on your website is that you're not blaming the foster care system. That you're not coming out and saying foster care system is terrible, all you foster homes are terrible, things like that. You're very open, and you said it kind of at the beginning of that portion of the conversation, is that you had a lot of great opportunities and a lot of great chances and a lot of people pulling for you, trying to help you, but you weren't ready for that yet. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't ready for it. I always tell people, you know, nobody gets placed in foster care because of something that they did. You know, it's always the neglect of the parent or the abuse of the parent that lands a child in foster care. What becomes our fault is our behavior behind it. So I had a great situation at my grandmother's house, a great situation. I was living with my grandma, my aunt, my uncles, and everything was perfect except for my behavior. I just could not adapt to that without my mom. I really needed my mom to be there, and every time she would show up and make me these promises that, you know, we're going to get a place together, or she's going to come home and live with all of us, and, you know, and stuff like that. And whenever she didn't come through, it just tore me up.
Yeah, especially as children, we don't understand all the things that are going on and the reasons why, and why am I here, and why is she like this, and why am I experiencing this? And so naturally you think, it's me. It's
absolutely
I'm the fault. I'm to blame. I'm the reason she doesn't want me. I'm the reason she's on drugs. I'm the reason that this isn't working, that I'm getting shuttled around. And even if we try as adults to try to deflect that, and it's not you, it's not you, it's not you, it's still there.
Yeah, and you know, just to add to that too, I didn't know anything about drugs. I didn't know what drugs were. I didn't know what my mom was doing. I never saw her put needles in her arms. I never saw, all I saw from the outside looking in is that my mom was having a great time with her friends.
Yep.
And, you know, we would go to the liquor store and I'd be sitting in the back of the car for hours while she'd be running the streets and laughing and running around doing whatever she was doing. So when it comes to, you know, what you just said, I thought that she loved her friends more than she loved me, and that she cared about hanging out with her friends more than me, and that everything else in the world was more important than me. I thought I was in the way of what she was trying to do. So, I mean, that, you know, when it comes to my belief system, I talk about that a little bit. My belief system is that, you know, at that time was that I was the problem, just like you said. You know, I'm the problem. Something's wrong with me. Why doesn't she love me? Why doesn't she laugh like that with me? Why does she smile? Why doesn't she smile at me like that? You know, why doesn't she want to spend that much time with me as she does with her friends? What is it about them?
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
I'm lacking something that she doesn't want to spend that time with me.
Yeah.
So you spend the next 10 years in the foster care system, and then you get to age 18. Can you tell me what happens to a child when they turn 18 in the foster care system?
I don't know what a lot of people have heard, but I'm gonna really say the truth of of it. I want to really put this out there.
Yeah.
What happens when a person turns 18 in foster care is it depends on when they come in, but the normal route of transitioning out of foster care is a very rigorous process. They try to get your support network together. They teach you all these things. They give you all these different opportunities leading up to when you age out of foster care. There's 4 different programs that they have existing right now that, you know, everything is pretty much given to you if you do a certain things, and the things that they're asking you to do is not really something that you can't do or too hard for you to do. One of the programs is just working part-time or going to school part-time or volunteering part-time, and you get $600 a month, up until you turn 21. But, going back to your question, what normally happens when someone ages out of foster care is either they take advantage of the opportunities that are given to them or and age out. I won't say successfully. I'll say with less headache,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
with less, and more opportunity. Either you're going to age out that way and have support, or you're going to leave foster care by yourself and you're not going to have the support, and you're going to end up going through all types of hell. So that's what I did. I aged out of foster care alone. I had a lot of opportunities that were trying to be handed to me, and I just didn't want to do it. There was a lot of different reasons for that. I was smoking weed at the time. I was drinking at the time. I was just being young and I was being wild, and I didn't want. I don't think at that time I wanted any rules. I didn't want anybody telling me what to do anymore. I had people telling me what to do all my life. I didn't want to do that anymore. And the last opportunity that I had, I was in a supervised independent living situation, and all I really had to do was not smoke in the house, not drink in the house, and not have people overnight. I did all of those things. And, when I was confronted by my supervisor, I lashed out on him, I threatened him and did all this kind of stuff. And eventually he just got tired of it and said, hey, I'm done. I've tried to help you. And at that point, I'm just past 18. I think my birthday was in May, and I got put out in June. Yeah, so at that time he was just like, you know what, hey, I'm done. And when my worker came over, I thought that there was something else. I thought she was going to take me to another placement. At that point I'm institutionalized. Like, you owe me another placement. I'm entitled to this. I'm entitled to that. And, she just said, hey, I don't have anywhere else for you to go. You're 18 years old. I've given you all kinds of opportunities. You've blown everything. You've self-sabotaged everything. At this point, you have to leave. And I did what I would normally do. I would, go through all these little tactics that I had. At first I would cry, and then I would, get angry and try to threaten and all this kind of stuff. And when I started threatening her, she called the police, and she said, you better get walking down the road or you're going to be in jail. And so that's where I got walking down the road with my bags. So again, going back to what you said earlier, that was my actions that got me there.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that the foster care system did to me.
Yeah.
The only thing that I could really fault the foster care system for is just not, the foster care system is so black and white. There's not a lot of gray. I just wish that there was more gray in some of the policies and procedures that state of Michigan has. But unfortunately, it's not that way. But I think we've come a long way in our state, especially in Michigan, at looking at people as more of a by person kind of thing, and not just, hey, it's this way, and that's just the way it's going to be. So,
wow. So you get kicked out of this facility. You're walking down the street with your bag. Do you remember the first night you were homeless?
Yeah, I remember the first night. The first night I was homeless, I actually was sleeping at an abandoned house. The girlfriend that I had at the time had ran away that day because she seen that I was getting kicked out. So she went home and she told her parents, hey, if you don't help my boyfriend, I'm gonna run away. And that's what she did. And they caught up with her and they said, hey, we're gonna help him out. We're gonna do what we can. And they took me over to this house that was actually an abandoned house. And and I went. I had to live there for 2 days. There was other people there that was, they were on the harder drugs. They were smoking crack and stuff like that. That was actually my first introduction to crack. I didn't smoke it at the time. I had just seen it. I was seeing it being done. And, I remember smoking the old cigarette butts out of ashtrays and stuff like that because I was a smoker back then. And just not having nothing. That was my first night homeless.
How long were you homeless for?
I was homeless for, I think at that time I was homeless for a week, and then I went to a place called Job Corps, and I didn't last there. I was only there for a few weeks, and then I ended up really homeless down in the Cass Corridor of Detroit. I went down there and I met a guy. I don't even remember how I met this guy. I remember. They used to have this program called General Assistance for Men back in the 90s. It's for single men, and the state would give you money for an apartment. They give you food stamps. And so I was on that program, and the only thing that I could afford was this motel room, and it was prostitute infested, it was drug infested and stuff like that. And so I got a room there, and the guy that was managing the motel was selling his drugs out of there. And so he looked at me as being kind of like fresh meat. He knew I didn't do any drugs before. And he was like, hey, man, I got a job for you. If you want to do it, you got to just stand in this hallway. You ain't got to go chase nobody. They'll know exactly who you are. I'll give you this sack of crack here, and all you got to do is just stand in the hallway. They'll come up to you, and I want this much per pack, and I'll pay you this much at the end of the night. And so that's what I did. And I did that for a while, and I think probably 2 months into it is when I got in my first drug raid.
Wow. So people talk about situations like this, like hitting rock bottom. Was there a point, like a specific event where you felt yourself hit rock bottom, or was it just kind of looking at what your life had become and saying, hey, I'm living in the rock bottom right now?
I think that was the rock bottom for me. One of them, because I've hit several layers.
Yeah.
That was my first rock bottom, where I was just like, oh crap, like, okay, what is my life gonna become? What do I do? What do I do from here? At that point I was 18 years old, approaching 19, and I'm just like, but I remember just that lonely feeling, that it was confusion. I remember going to the corner store and buying, I think I bought a loaf of bread, some peanut butter, some jelly, I bought some lunch meat, and I bought a big old container of orange juice, and I brought it back to the room. And this was before the guy had asked me, to sell his drugs. I got that stuff back to the room, and I just sat in my room, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do.
Wow.
I was scared. I didn't know nobody there. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't even know. I know this might sound funny, but I didn't know to get a job.
Right.
Yeah. I didn't know to go work somewhere or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it might sound funny to people who haven't experienced this firsthand, but I mean, you talk about situations like this, you really giving people the tools to figure out life and equipping them. But if that hasn't been given to you, you can literally end up in a hotel room going, okay, I've got my thing of orange juice. Now what do I do? And having no idea where to start or who to talk to, or like, what do I need to get a job? Like, how do I go about doing that? It's just like you have nothing. Yeah. So how did you end up coming out of this?
How did I end up coming out of
your situation, living at the motel and you're selling drugs, and you're kind of saying, hey, this is like, I'm in a bad spot?
I came out of that by going to prison.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, so I committed, some petty crimes and stuff like that, and then there was the raid, and then that's when I got on this thing called lifetime probation, which was 5 years. They took crack selling very seriously back then, and so I was on lifetime probation. And I was eating out of soup kitchens and stuff like that. I was homeless. The guy really didn't want anything to do with me at that point because I had been busted, so I was on the police radar. And then I came up to Bay City just on I had my last, I think I went and donated plasma, and I bought a bus ticket, and I came up to Saginaw is where I came. And I ended up getting in trouble in Bay City. And I actually was drunk, and me and a friend got drunk, and I stabbed him in a drunken blackout, and woke up in the Bay County Jail. And within a year, I was in prison on a violation of probation and the new charge that I did for that assault. And so that's where that part of my life ended.
Yeah. How long was your sentence for?
I was sentenced to 5 to 10, and then when I went back to Wayne County on my probation violation, they sentenced me a 1 to 20, and concurrently it added up to a 5 to 20. Oof. And so I served 5 years of that, and then I got out and went right back in on a parole violation, and I did another 18 months. Whoa. So I did close to 7 years.
So that second stint, 18 months, you come walking out of prison for the second time. What are you thinking in that moment?
In that moment, I was just hungry to get my life together. I didn't know what my life would become. I knew what I wanted it to look like. I had a lot of time to think about it. Right. I knew what I wanted it to look like. I wanted to go to college and stuff like that. So I tried doing that, but then I relapsed after a year of being out. Relapsed, started smoking weed and drinking, and then I started selling weed and stuff like that. I became more of a drug seller and a drug hustler than a drug user at that point. And so I started doing that.
Something I love about your story, and we're going to start turning around in a second. So don't, if you're listening at home. So something I love about your story is that it really highlights this idea that recovery and changing your story, which we'll talk about, it's a process. It's not like something happens to you once, and for most of us at least, it takes more than once. It takes twice. It takes 3 times, or you fail really, really hard, and then you fail really seriously, and then you fail a little less hard, and then you get it together. And I think sometimes we do ourselves a great disservice when we don't talk about that, because it sends this impression out to the world, to all of the people, and we're including ourselves in this, that are struggling. And you think, like, I should have gotten it together right then, but here I am in the same situation, or falling into the bad habits again. And then you turn into yourself, and I'm a failure, I'm all this. But when you talk to so many people that have come back from such immense challenges, it's almost never, it was that moment 27 years ago in that hotel, and I've been perfect since. It's a bumpy road.
It is.
Yeah. So how did you start putting that life together that you wanted? You come out of prison, you end up selling again. How do you end up finally saying, okay, this is what I have to do, and start this road to what we're about to talk to, River Jordan?
Okay. I think that's a loaded question, but I'm gonna get through that one. I had been through another drug raid, and this was in 2000, I think it was 2001. I had a son, and that was that began the turning point, because now there's somebody besides me.
Yeah. Right.
That's when I started thinking about things, and I would look at my son and I would say all the time that I don't want him to be left without me or without a parent, and I knew that the person that I was with at the time, if we didn't stop our lifestyle together, then I wasn't going to make it unless I left. And that was hard for me, because here I am breaking up a family.
Now you're the one doing the leaving.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And so I stayed in that for a long time, a lot longer than I should have. But I stayed in that because of my son, and I had a stepdaughter at the time too, that didn't have a father coming up, who I met when she was 3. And so, and I loved her very much too. And that started the starting point, the turning point in my life. I tried to quit several times, but me living with someone that was using, it was impossible.
Yeah.
It was impossible.
It's always in front of you. It's always easy. It's always accessible. You have somebody saying, hey, but you can handle it.
Yeah. Or we would argue about it, because I would say, hey, I'm not going to try to change you. You're not going to try to change me. And I'm going to live my life over here. You're going to live your life. And it just did not work. And so finally I said, okay, I have to leave. And so that's when I left, and I went into a major, major depression. I mean, a major depression, more than I've ever experienced in my life, I think. Because now I'm away from my kids. The woman that I loved at the time, it couldn't work out between us, because she had her way, I had my way. And it was rough. And I remember hitting that rock bottom where I started thinking the idea of suicide started to get real. It came back, that suicide ideation, or however you say it. And so I started thinking more about suicide. And the scary part about it is, when I first started thinking about suicide, I was like, you can't do that. You got a son. But then after a while, it started to be like, your son will be okay after a while. I started to say stuff like that. And I got to the point where I was okay with that. I was okay that he would be all right soon. And but I knew, looking back on my life, that I had been through so much, that there was a power greater than myself that was with me the whole time. Even like I said before, when my mother stopped using drugs, just like that, after she found out she was pregnant with me, you know, and it, you know, the reality of God being with me this whole time just became a real big thing. And I started seeking God on, okay, why am I here? You know, what am I here for? What are we doing? You know, and then it was revealed to me through him that my purpose was to help people that have been in foster care like myself, and to help them not only transition out of foster care, but to meet their recovery path, you know, and to share with them what God was about to share with me in my recovery path. And so that's when I started to go to like NA meetings and AA meetings and stuff like that, and really getting a handle on what recovery is and what recovery looks like for me. And I started on that path, and it was not easy. It was rough. And in a couple of years into my sobriety, I started working with other addicts that were getting clean, and I became a recovery coach, and and stuff like that. And I started to understand. I started to unpack my own story. I got that documentary called "I Changed My Story," and what recovery does is it takes you back and it has you unpack your whole belief system. That's where it starts. And so I remember one time I went to a meeting, and there was this woman that came in, black woman. She came into the meeting, and she started sharing, and she was just crying, and she started talking about how, her kid had got pulled away in foster care, and that she really loved her kid, and that she didn't know how to stop using. And she was, the withdrawals was really painful to her, and she didn't want to use, but she didn't want to feel the pain either at the same time and all that. And I'm just looking at her, and a picture of my mom, replaced her face, and I started to realize, okay, that's what my mom was going through. And so it wasn't that my mom didn't love me and my mom didn't care about me. It was that the drugs had taken over her life in such a way that she couldn't be the mom that she wanted to be. Because drugs has this way of making all your responsibilities go out the window, and that becoming the first thing in your life. And so once I started really understanding that is when I started really unpacking my story, and I couldn't blame myself anymore for being this bad person.
There's a really beautiful part in the documentary where you go to your mother's gravestone, her headstone, and there's B-roll clips of you taking care of it, like pulling the weeds and things like that. How important is forgiveness to your story?
Forgiveness is everything. For me, anyway. It's not enough to be we got awareness, understanding, acceptance, and forgiveness. It's not enough to do those three things and not do that last step. Forgiveness is a process. I call it a recovery process, because forgiveness is, for me and for most of us, is a lifelong process, because there's triggers that happen throughout your life that reminds you of a place that you were at. And you always have to make that decision that you let it go. And you always have to remind yourself that you let it go. Every Christmas, every Mother's Day, every holiday, or whatever season that triggers me, I have to remind myself that, hey, I let that go. I'm done with that. The feelings and emotions still arise, but I have to either go out throughout the whole day and say I let it go, or do it in that instant and say I let it go and move on.
There's a great quote from the documentary where you describe, you say, forgiveness can't wait for your feelings. It's a decision that you make.
Absolutely.
And like, I watched that documentary yesterday, and I'm still thinking about it, that quote 24 hours later, because it is so true. I mean, if we all just waited until our feelings were gone and we don't feel that way anymore, I mean, there wouldn't be any forgiveness. And I think your point is that forgiveness is a decision in the despite those feelings. Because then it's not really forgiveness, because it doesn't matter. You're not sacrificing anything.
Right.
You're not giving anything to
Right.
anybody because you've moved on, and it's nothing. But forgiveness is, despite the way that this makes me feel, I am making a decision to forgive you because that's what needs to happen. It's such a beautiful moment in the documentary.
Yeah, it's forgiveness is everything for me. You know, I always kind of give this illustration, how forgiveness can work and how triggers work. You know, you take a woman who's been cheated on by her husband, and she decides to forgive him and carry on with the marriage. And they go to counseling and they do all these things and they rekindle the flame, and everything's good. She still has this memory, right? But she's not dwelling on it. She chose to let it go. But maybe one day she woke up, you know, and she wasn't feeling so confident about herself. Maybe her clothes didn't fit right or something like that day. And they're walking in the mall, and, you know, her husband just happens to glance over at, you know, at a display, and a woman of a shapely, you know,
Yeah, the comparison starts.
Yeah, and goes by right at the same time that he's looking in that direction, and she just happens to see him right at the same time, and then she just gets upset, you know, thinking that he's looking at the woman when really he's looking at the shoes, and she gets upset. She has to make a decision right there if she is going to let it go like she did before, or is she going to dwell on it? You know, or is she going to let it carry out throughout the day? Is she going to be in this state of unforgiveness? Because when you're in a state of unforgiveness, the state is resentment, anger, you know, all that kind of stuff that goes along with it. You know, are you going to choose to continue to let it go, or are you going to dwell on it and get back into that state of mind that you're in? So triggers is important to understand, and to understand your own triggers. Yeah. You know, we can't understand all of them, but we can have a good handle on what triggers us. You know,
You can be a little bit more prepared for those. I know that a trigger of mine is this, and so going into it, I can be a little bit more prepared to make that decision.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Have you referenced that the last time that you talked to your mom was going back to her and having a conversation about your relationship, and it didn't go well, and that was the last time that you saw your mom. How old were you when you had that conversation with her?
I was, I think I was 18. I just aged out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right before. Yeah. Okay. So have you forgiven yourself for that conversation?
I'm glad you asked that, because a lot of my journey with all of this is forgiving myself, because my mom's passed away and gone.
Right.
You know? But yes, I have forgiven myself, and that was a journey in itself.
I can imagine. I mean, you're dealing with a lifetime full of baggage is such a minimal word, but we'll call it baggage. A lifetime of experiences. Like, that's a lot to unpack.
Yes.
You mentioned also someone that was really critical in showing you to change your story. And I didn't catch his name, but you had said that he confronted you and that he forced you to change your perspective and to put yourself in your own story. Do you remember who that was?
Yes. So I talked about a person, his name is Bishop T.D. Jakes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was, I still, you know, I'm indirectly mentored by him. He doesn't know he mentors me, but yes, just listening to his teachings and his sermons and stuff like that, talking about forgiveness. And, but the main thing that he talks about a lot is your belief system. And when you think about your belief system starts to birth itself from a very young age. And that turns into like your default settings. And then later on in life, you start to change, you know. So when you're triggered by something, the first thing your brain wants to do is take you back to your default settings and for you to react the way that you would normally react. But you always have to have in front of your head that you've changed that. You've forgiven that, or you've changed that, or I'm doing something different today. Sometimes you do it consciously, sometimes you do it subconsciously. But in order to change, you have to change your belief system, though. You have to go back and you have to look at your story, like me looking at my story about how I'm not good enough or how I'm not worthy enough or how I'm not handsome enough or whatever. That all went back to my childhood because I was trying to explain to myself why this was going on. Why is my mother not keeping her promises? Why is she not coming to pick me up for home visits? Why can't she stay clean? Or why, and I would always blame myself, and I would pick apart every little thing about me that I thought were defects, and I would say that's the reason why. And so, and that went throughout all of my relationships back in the day. If I got rejected, it was something I did. If somebody didn't like me, it was something I did. Or maybe I wasn't good looking enough, or maybe I wasn't smart enough, or something like that. It always came back to me, and trusting other people, trusting foster parents or trusting staff. It was the belief that if I can't trust my own mother, then I can't trust nobody.
Right.
And so you go through life and nobody's going to compare to your mom.
Right.
So now you can't trust nobody. And then you can even take it farther than that. If I can't trust my mom, then I can't trust women.
Yeah.
It can go far as you saying, I can't trust black women.
Yeah.
I know some people that will not date in their race because they were traumatized by their race.
Yeah. Yeah. The brain is, your brain's looking for a way to protect yourself.
Exactly.
And we do all sorts of crazy coping, self-sabotage, whatever you want to call it, mechanisms to try to protect ourselves from that kind of trauma and harm. Even if it doesn't make any sort of sense on the outside, you're looking at the wound and your brain is going, okay, well, I associate pain with this kind of person. I need to stay away from this kind of person, or that person is bad, or they'll hurt you again.
And then with Bishop T.D. Jakes, also helping me understand what a relationship with God looks like, and helping me understand the type of character God is. The type of being that God is, that he's a loving being, that he's a forgiving being, that he's understanding, he's faithful, he's just, he's all these things. When my perception of God before those teachings was that he was this being in a cloud with a rod waiting to beat me down every time I did something wrong, and so helping me understand that relationship, was key to my recovery, because now I'm looking at God as somebody who's not standing there waiting to accuse me, every time I did something wrong, but is waiting for me to come to him so I can better myself, so he can help me better myself, so he can, help me understand his understanding of me. There's a scripture in the Bible that says, it says to lean not on your own understanding. I used to look at that scripture and I would say, okay, lean not on your own understanding probably means lean not on your own understanding of the scriptures, or your own understanding of what just happened in your life. Maybe you went through a tragedy and you have your own understanding. But for me, leaning on my own understanding meant leaning not on my own understanding of me, but lean on his understanding of me. And once I lean on his understanding of me, then I can line myself up with that. But going in, I had to lean on his own understanding of me, because my understanding, I would never get nothing done. Yeah. There would be no River Jordan if I leaned on my own understanding of me. I I remember my first chamber speaking thing when I got on the soapbox.
Yeah. How'd that go?
Oh my God. I got on a soapbox, and first of all, it felt like I was up there forever.
And it's something like 60 seconds.
Yeah.
On that soapbox. Yeah.
I got on that soapbox, and you know, my own understanding of me.
Yeah.
You know, I got up there, and I was so nervous, and the sweat was pouring down my back, and you know, and the whole time I'm looking at myself on how I see myself. I'm not good enough to stand up here in front of all these folks, and these folks are educated, they're business people, they're community people, and these people are great. And look at me, I've been to prison, and I've been to this, and I've been to that, you know, and stuff like that. And the message that I was trying to give was so hard to convey to them because I was thinking about how I saw myself. And you know, I even go to the mission sometimes, and I speak at chapel service I do it every Friday. But I remember going there for the first time, and I was talking about my story, and again, sweat pouring down my back and me being so nervous and stuff like that. And once I realized that I'm up there for them and not for me, then everything just went smooth, you know. And once I got up there at my next chamber thing or my next event, and I leaned on God's understanding of who I am, God says that, you know, that he loves me, that he's protecting me, and that I'm fearfully and marvelously made and all these other things like that. You know, I can lean on that and be confident that I'm where I'm supposed to be.
I love it. Yeah. Speaking of where you're supposed to be, you're the founder of River Jordan. Before you give me the 101 about what River Jordan, what it is, do you remember a moment where you had said earlier that you started feeling called to help the people, the young adults aging out, in the same way that you needed help, but you're saying this is my purpose. Do you remember like a moment when the idea for River Jordan became kind of a concrete thought in your brain and said, yes, this is what I need to do?
So, I went to a place, it was called Boysville. It was a placement down in Tecumseh, Michigan. It was a 60-acre campus with 12 buildings on it, a pond, and all this stuff like that. It was an old placement that I was at. It was one of my favorite placements. But I went down there because I was I'm still writing my book, actually, called I Changed My Story. And I was wanting to get inspired for the conclusion of my book. And so I went down there, and the campus was closed. It had been closed for a couple years.
Oh, wow.
And it was around July. I was down there, and I was walking around the campus, and I was just going through the buildings and stuff like that, and just taking it all in. And I was walking in the school because they had a school on the campus. So I was walking in the school, and I was like, you know, this would be such a great place to make for young people that are going through foster care, like a school of transition. It would be awesome for transition age foster youth to come here and learn and get ready to be out there on their own, learn trades and stuff like that. And I just had this idea, and I'm walking around, and I said to myself, there's no way I would do something like this. I said, you know, and I'm just talking to myself. And at that time, I think I was 40, I think I was like 46 or 47 years old. And I said, Lord, there's no way I could do this because I'm too old. Like, this is a big, huge undertaking. And so I drove away off the campus, and I'm driving down the back road there, and a voice just said, why don't you do it? And I said, no way, no way, no way, no way. And the voice came again, why don't you do it? You're able, you're capable.
It's the burning bush.
Yeah. And I started crying. I just bust out in tears because I was scared. I was scared. I just, again, that belief system. It wasn't that I couldn't do it. I just didn't think I was good enough to do it. And I cried and I cried, and I got home and I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I prayed about it, and I was asking God to pass that from me and to give it to somebody else who was more qualified, more educated, more experienced and all that kind of stuff. But then after a few weeks, I just gave into it. And that's when I started working on River Jordan.
I'll save my commentary for the end. I'm gushing with so many emotions. Tell me about what River Jordan is. Give me kind of the 101 of where it is, what it is, how does it help the community?
So River Jordan, the name actually came from when I was down at that campus. God told me to call it River Jordan because it is the place of transition. In the Bible, the Israelites was going from exile to the promised land, and the place in between is that River Jordan. And that's where a lot of work takes place. That's where a lot of change takes place and prepares you for that promised land. So that's where the name came from. And River Jordan is a threefold program. We have peer support, which is peer means someone who's been through a similar situation that you have. So we have a peer support program. It's a mentor service. And then we have life skill coaching. The life skill coaching comes from, we have a partnership with Saginaw Valley, so we get social work interns from there that do our life skill coaching. They go by a curriculum that we have that teaches on the 7 life skill domains. And then we have our transitional housing program for young people who have aged out of foster care between the ages of 18 and 21. And then we have our lifelong continuum support. So you could be 40 years old and come walking through our doors and say, hey, I used to be in foster care and, I need help, or I need to learn this awareness, understanding, acceptance, and forgiveness pathway of recovery. So we see ourselves as the forever family of those that have experienced foster care.
That was something that you said in the documentary that I connected with right away. You had said something, you were working with a group, I don't know if it was staff at River Jordan, but you had said that you didn't really believe in having an age limit for the services, right? Because people are dealing with things when they are ready, and that could be 18 when they are aged out and they're ready to go on and crush life and they've got everything, that's their time. Some of us could be 48, 58 years old.
Like me, 43.
Yeah, and finally starting to unpack or at least being at the point where you're ready to make decisions and do things differently and confront yourself with some things. And I love that idea that there isn't, like, if you're 30, we can't help you because you should have done that earlier. Right. Like, no, we are here to help you whenever you need it.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
When did River Jordan, when was it first opened?
We opened in 2019, okay. But we got our 501c3 in 18.
Okay, cool. How many folks have you helped through River Jordan?
Hundreds.
Wow.
Yep, hundreds. With seminars that we do for the state of Michigan. We also do trainings.
Yeah, tell me about that, because there might be people listening to this saying, hey, I want to hear more from Ayland and River Jordan, but how do I do that? Tell me about those trainings.
So we have 4 trainings that we do specifically for current and former foster youth. One is human and sex trafficking and why the foster youth are the most targeted. We also do the I Changed My Story. That's basically a testimonial of where I came from and how I changed my story. And it talks about the belief systems and all that. And then we have relationships. We talk about we talk about comrade, constituents, and confidants. So we talk about the difference between the 3. And basically, that's helping the current and former foster youth understand what relationships are, who's who and what's what, you know, how to handle the comers and goers in our life. Some people come into your life for a certain reason and then they leave. Actually, most people come into your life temporarily. That's why people usually have a small circle of friends that are with them all the time or that are, you know, just lifelong friends. But we have a lot of acquaintances. Those are your comers and goers. So, and I invented that training because that is one of the most challenging things that current and former foster youth face is learning how to deal with people in relationships. Sometimes we get too close to people that we shouldn't be getting too close to.
Right.
And sometimes we don't get close enough to the people that we should be getting close to.
I was just saying, like, this training sounds like for every single human ever, like if you're in the foster care system or not, just being able to sit down and really define different kinds of relationships and say that doesn't make me bad, doesn't make them bad. It's just, this is the role of this relationship right now. And if it goes away, it's not because of something I did or I'm not good enough. It's the nature of relationships. We can't have deep soul moving relationships with every single person. Like we don't have the capacity for it. But here's how to define this. And here's like, this person is really, really important to you. And so you should invest time and energy and attention and really make it work, because that's a critical relationship. Whereas if you're coming out of the foster care system, you might think nobody's a critical relationship, or I'm really enticed by this relationship. Meanwhile, I'm neglecting something that really could change my life in the process. Wow.
Yeah.
So hundreds of people.
Hundreds. And then we got another training called Intro to Foster Care Recovery, which is awareness, understanding, acceptance, and forgiveness. So hundreds, because we've done the Michigan Teen Conference, which a lot of kids go to that are current and former foster youth. And then we do trainings for the MYOI enrollees, the Michigan Youth Opportunities Initiative enrollees, and those are transition age foster youth. And we've also, the trainings are available to anybody. So we can do it for churches, churches who, a lot of foster parents come out of the church. Yeah. So if a church wanted to say, hey, we want you to do this training for potential foster parents. We do it for that too. And then it's a requirement for all of those that are in our transitional housing to go through all of those trainings with us.
Awesome. Can you tell me about Mama D?
Mama D, I just saw her.
Did you?
Yeah, I just saw her 2 days ago.
Did you really?
She came to see me, yeah. Mama D.
Tell me about how you guys met.
So we met at the time I was broke. I needed, to make some money, and she was working on a house.
And what's her real name?
D. Holly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Holly.
So she was working on a house because she invests in real estate. And she was working on a house, and I was at church where I met her, and she said, hey, I got some work that needs to be done or whatever, and would you mind, come and see what I got? So I went over there and I started doing some work for her, and didn't know what I was doing, but she was kind of teaching me, hey, you do it like this, do it like that.
Yeah.
So,
and this is before River Jordan?
This was before River Jordan.
I'm just
way
clarifying.
before.
Yeah, clarifying the timeline. So this is before River Jordan, but you got to hear the story.
Yeah, this is way before.
Yeah.
And so I was working with her and just talking to her. She's a talker like me, and we just kind of was sharing and stuff like that. And one day I went over there to do some work, and, I was telling her my story, kind of got more into it. And she looked at me and she said, now, and she's such a soft-spoken lady. Mm-hmm. She was like, and she's very forward. And she was like, now, I don't want to hear anything out of you because I don't want to have to get my fly swatter on you when I say this, but today you are my son. I'm claiming you as my son, and I don't want to hear nothing about it. I said, okay. I said, okay. And I was so happy, but at the same time I was scared. I was scared because here we are, you know, my belief system about foster parents,
Yeah.
you know, and that I shouldn't get close to them and all this stuff like that, and the betrayal thing and stuff like that.
Even using the same word like mom,
Yes.
mother, and
Yes.
you're talking about triggers. Like
Yes.
that's the one.
Yes. And, you know, even thinking about the last time I talked to my mom and what I said to her, you know, and stuff like that. And so it took me a minute. You know, she had to actually, I guess, train me how to be okay with loving her and her loving
wow.
me. Yeah. Yeah. I remember one time when I was going through my divorce, I was struggling financially, and I didn't say anything to her. And she knew I was struggling, and she said, so I went and I was just around, you know, looking around properties and seeing, you know, about some properties that were up for taxes or whatever like that. And she said, how's your house going, your rental? And I was telling her about it and everything. And she said, okay. And then the next time I saw her, she said, I paid the taxes on your rental. She said, I know you're struggling. And I said, what? And she was like, yeah. She was like, don't worry about it. And I said, I don't know when I'm going to pay you. She said, don't worry about it. I'm not asking you to pay me. And she said, you don't understand this, but that's what mothers do for their kids, you know? And when she said that, it was just like, I knew what she was saying, but I really couldn't grasp the concept of that kind of care, you know? And I still was telling her that I wanted to pay her back, but it was gift. And I didn't know how to receive that from her, you know? And that was just one of the examples of her helping me to get in the groove of, you know, being a part of the family, you know? And she's got I think she's got like 10 or 15 other kids, you know, besides me, because she loves to do that. But I would never known that she had other kids because she doesn't, that's how close me and her are. You know what I mean? You wouldn't know that she didn't have time for you because we're that close and she makes time.
And she's not wearing it as a badge of honor. By the way, I've got 14 other informally adopted kids, so don't think you're the special one. Like, no, you are special to me. You are, I want to make this relationship a loving one for you. It's not another check mark. It's not another, you know, badge of honor, or St. Peter says, come on in, Mama D, you earned it.
Yeah.
Like, no, she legitimately wants you to feel loved. What an amazing person.
Yes. And she, you know, when I started taking care of my grandmother, she, you know, there's a lot going on at that time. I was packing my grandmother's house up and everything and had to sell it and had to move her up here and stuff like that. And Mom just came alongside of me and said, what do you need? You know, she was already at my new house. She was getting stuff together. She was putting things away, unpacking and all this kind of stuff. And she's just been such a amazing help for me. I always tell her, you know, I wish I could do more for you than you do for me, but she's just so self-sufficient in that way, and she doesn't ask for anything. So I never know what she needs.
Yeah. Well, if you need anything, Mama D, Ayland is here for you.
Yeah.
So just shoot me a list or something. I'll give him the list. You don't have to say a thing to him. We'll drop some.
Yeah, something besides cut the grass, because I could do that for you all day. But you know.
So the last time in this conversation we heard about your grandma was the night that you had your tantrum. You ended up in the boys' house. You just brought her up again, though, in that you packed her up, you moved her here to Bay City. Tell me about your relationship now with your grandmother.
Yeah, so my grandmother is like everything to me. You know, she's mom, dad, she's everything.
That's so impressive to me, considering how the last time you had this interaction, it'd be really easy to just say, well, she wrote you off and you're product of the system now and we'll never get back together. But here now you're saying she's everything.
She's everything, and she never wrote me off. She just knew that she couldn't care for me because I was such an angry kid, you know. She took care of me for 6 years, and I don't know how many temper tantrums she had to deal with. So she never wrote me off. But now I've been taking care of my grandmother for about 4 years almost. She has dementia. And, you know, she wanted me to be her, you know, her caretaker. And so I did it with honors, you know, with honor. I just, you know, I'm so honored and grateful that I'm in a place that I'm useful enough to take care of my grandmother, you know, like she took care of me, you know, which I think is another crazy, crazy thing. But yeah, so she's got dementia. I moved her up here about 3.5 years ago. And so now I'm her caretaker, and I've been doing it since.
Incredible. So here, 2019, River Jordan opens. We're here in 2023, so about 4 years or so, if I'm doing the math right. 4 years into this, and you're looking back at the life that you had. What does River Jordan mean to you? How has it changed you?
What River Jordan means to me is purpose. I believe that before I was even born, God purposed me to do this. He's taken the things that should have killed me and really turned them around for the good of the community, for the good of you know, current and former foster youth. It's given me, like I said, a sense of purpose. How it's changed me. Again, I think it comes down to a sense of purpose. I'm honored by it. I still can't believe God chose me to do this. I still am so grateful for it. That's such a loaded question. I mean, it changed me. It just, I don't know. That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just, because there's such a mutual journey through this. Like here you are looking back at a lifetime saying, I'm going to give someone the help that not only I needed at that time, but then in probably a lot of ways still need, because you're still trying to unpack your story and reframing it in perspective and dealing with triggers and kind of the things that you've conditioned yourself from age 2 until now, that you're helping people while also helping yourself. And I just think that's beautiful.
Yes.
When you talk so much about changing your story, and you have some things in one of your trainings that I kind of want to touch on a little bit, because you have such a great perspective on these experiences, and I think it'd be great for the people listening to kind of leave them with some of the advice or the tips or the tools that you've used. And one of the things that you have on your website is the importance of confronting your story and eliminating false elements. When you say confronting your story, what does that mean?
Confronting the story, it's kind of like if there was a chair in your path, you have to go up to it and you have to confront it and you have to grab it and you have to pull it to the side, and then you keep walking straight. But you can't conquer that chair unless you confront that chair. That's kind of an analogy I can give you for that. And then breaking it, you have to be honest completely when you confront your story. You can't leave your side out. You have to include yourself in the story too. You know, for instance, you know, my part in me going to a residential placement, I had to see my part in that, or else I couldn't change it, right? Because when I first got into recovery, when I was 43, there was still anger and there was still resentment, right? And so I had to confront all elements, and I have to bring myself to the table and say, okay, there's two sides of every story. What's my side of the street? What do I need to clean up? You know, yes, my grandmother took me to a residential placement, but what was my part in that? And my part was the anger and the resentment that I had. So let's deal with that. Let's deal with that. So then when opportunities come my way, I don't have this to deal with again. You know, what is my part in not, what is my part in the reason why I got divorced? Right? You know, because I was married before. My part was I had trust issues. You know, if I really want to be honest, I had trust issues. You know, let's not just look at somebody else's part, you know. And so I had to deal with that moving forward. I'm engaged now, but before I got engaged, I had to work on that. So I didn't bring that to my new marriage.
Otherwise, you keep running into the same chair.
You keep running to the same thing. And so that's how you end up changing your story over time, is when you start confronting the parts of your story that you're not willing to, and most of us are not willing to confront our side.
Something that you kept saying in the documentary was putting yourself into your story. Yeah. And at the time, I wasn't quite sure what you meant. Like, he keeps saying this, and I know it's important, but I couldn't quite wrap my head around it. But the way that you're putting it right now is so clear, because it can be so easy for all of us to make our story about what everybody else's story is. I am a product of this because of this person, or of this person, or I'm here because of this, or if this person would have done that better, then I would have been there, which all can be true. Like, those can all be true. But this idea of saying, but my story is my story. So what did I bring to this? And what am I still bringing to this that I either need to continue carrying with me, or I need to address, move off to the side so that I can be engaged?
And what I used to do is I would always, when I was young, I would learn how to tell my story in a lot of different ways, depending on what I wanted to get out of a person.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or depending on how much I wanted to sidestep my own personal accountability, I would tell my story. And I remember one time I was in the back of the police car when we got raided that one time. I was in the back of the police car. I was 18 years old, and I was scared. And so I started telling the police about how, my grandmother didn't want me, so she just threw me in foster care. And my mom hated me, and she didn't love me, and all this stuff like that. And everything was pointing out. And a lot of it wasn't even true. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And so after I went on this 5-minute rant of things, and I pulled out the tears and I pulled out all the weaponry, right?
Yeah, right.
And after I got done, he said, "You know what? You just need to shut up. You got a right to remain silent. You need to exercise that right and just be quiet." And right then and there, it told me two things: is that I'm in the real world now, and the world does not care about my experience of foster care. But it also told me that, my story, it didn't work anymore. It didn't work anymore. Yeah. The ways that I was sidestepping accountability did not work anymore. And a lot about when you tell your story certain ways, and when it's not truthful, especially if you tell it so long and so many times, after a while, you start to believe some of those elements of your story. You start to believe it. And, you ever talk to somebody and you tell a story all the time or whatever, and then another person, says, "Oh, I didn't see it like that. I don't remember it being like that." You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's kind of how it was with me. And so like I always tell people in River Jordan, I always say, hey, let's first unpack the awareness of recovery. What really happened? okay, are you aware of why you were in foster care? And most kids will say, I'm in foster care because my mom did this or did that or whatever, or, my mom was just hanging out with her boyfriends and doing all that kind of stuff like that. They really don't understand the real reason why they're in foster care, and then then they'll say, oh, okay, well, yeah, all right, well, I was neglected. My mom left me here, left me there. I was abused. So now they understand the why, the awareness. And then the understanding comes where, okay, what does drugs do to people? Drugs will make you do things that you wouldn't normally do as a parent. It will make you sidestep responsibility. It will make you put that thing first. So now you can't blame yourself because you got to look at the drugs as being the problem.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So now you can't say that you're the bad person because drugs made that person do this or that. And then the acceptance is just saying, okay, I accept life on life's terms. Life is what it is. Good things happen to bad people. Bad things happen to good people. We don't get to say how a person's life should turn out or what they should be doing or what, or whatever. Life happens on its own terms. We don't have control over that. And then the forgiveness part, is just letting it go, accepting life on life's terms and letting it go. So yeah.
Wow. The next part from that, after that, you say to accept your truth. When you say accept your truth, what do you mean by that? Because we hear it on Instagram, we hear it kind of in that space in self-help, and like you have to live your truth, you have to accept your truth. What does that phrase mean to you in this context, though?
Accepting the truth of my story is just accepting all the events that happened. I was in foster care. My mom was an addict. She died young. I went through 20 different placements. This is the truth, and just accepting it and not beating yourself down because of it, and just accepting it for what it is because it's the past. You can't do anything about it anyway.
Right.
So you just got to accept it and move on.
There's, I don't know if you feel this way, but in all the interviews I've done, there's always a certain openness with people who have gotten to that point of accepting their truth. And it almost like this conversation with you, there's an element of freedom with it and openness with it, because you're not trying to hide anything. You're not trying to say, well, like I got into some trouble when I was a kid, but I'm not here to talk about that. There's none of that. There's this is who I am as a person. This is my story and this is my experience and this is why I'm here today. And so, yeah, I'm willing to talk to you about these things that traditionally would make people say, there's no way I'm ever going to talk to anybody about any of that, because what would they think of me otherwise? And I feel that with you, that there is an openness of this acceptance.
And the reason for that is I don't turn any podcasts or interviews down. The reason why I don't is because it's an opportunity to share my story with them, with the audience, and so that maybe they can be comfortable with their truth and accepting their truth and moving on, so they're not so embarrassed by the things that they've went through, because I think all of us have been through something. And I go back to the chamber event. You don't know how many businessmen that I've met in this community that when they told their story to me, my jaw was on the ground. Like, some of these businessmen around here have had worse life experiences than I have. And, here I was in a room full of all these businessmen and women, and thinking that they don't know what it's like. They're better than me, or they're this, or they got it together and stuff like that. And I think that we do God a disservice by not telling people what he has brought us through. We do him a disservice when we do that, because we're not pouring into people. And I think that's what we're all here to do. We're not here to pour into ourselves. We're here to pour into other people. And I think that when you walk around like you've never been through anything and you don't share with people what God has done for you, or whatever your higher power has done for you, then you do that higher power a disservice, and you do a disservice to other people.
Mm-hmm. And then finally, when you talk about accepting your truth, you talk about living a new normal. And I'm interested by this because you go through things and you've conditioned your brain to think a certain way, and it's almost like sometimes you feel that you are not worth being happy, or that you feel you're suddenly happy after going through something, or you've changed your life in some way and you feel almost like you're betraying something, or I shouldn't feel this way. And so this idea of living a new normal can be kind of weird and uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So talk to me about this idea of living a new normal.
So living a new normal for me is living contrary to what my belief system was. Everything contrary to it. You know, I am good enough. I am smart enough. I am handsome enough. I am worthy. I'm capable. This is my story.
Yeah.
And it's okay to be my story. You know, I can share my story. I don't have to worry about your judgment. I'm here to help you. I'm here to, and another truth of my story is it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to feel. It's okay to trust. It's okay. That's what I talk about when I talk about my new normal. That's my new normal. I don't know what other people's new normal is, but that's my new normal. And that's what I try to wake up and be every single day, is that new normal.
Yeah, and I love that you're making this point that the new normal is guided by the new value system, the new standards and the new operating system, if you want to call it that, because if you defaulted into what you were doing before, or if it's not a conscious and intentional decision, you just kind of default and you end up a year, 2 years, 6 months, whatever it is, falling into the same trap because you didn't give yourself new tools to work with. You just fell back on the old one.
Right.
Yeah. How much staff do you have at River Jordan?
Well, we have 3. We usually run 3 interns and myself, and then we have sometimes we'll have a volunteer that runs the reception.
Okay.
The reception desk, but that's what we run.
Man, I don't know how often you're thanked for what you're doing, but I want to thank you for what you're doing. You multiple times through this interview said, I don't know if I'm the right person at the time. I don't know if the right person. Send somebody else. It's not me. It's not me. It's not me. I'm not good enough. Send somebody else who can actually do this. And then I heard you list off, you've helped hundreds of people. You're helping the state. You're doing all of these things, speaking in all these trainings. I think you're exactly the right person.
Thank you.
I think your story has shaped you into exactly the right person to be doing this work.
Yeah.
The experience, the eyewitness experience of it, the firsthand experience of it, the the longevity of it, all of those things, I think gives you a level of expertise and empathy and understanding that you couldn't get any other way. And I think looking back on these years, that those equipped you with the tools you needed to do the work that you need to do. And you are absolutely doing it here for us in this community. And I want to thank you for the time that you spent with me today.
Thank you.
And all of the time that you're spending trying to help these young adults transitioning out, and older adults trying to grapple with things that they're trying to grapple with. So I want to thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Ayland, if people want more information, either on trainings, on donations, volunteers, like any sort of way to support you and what you're doing, what's the best way to go about doing that?
So you can, of course, give us a call. Our number is 989-391-4046. Or you can email us at admin@riverjordaninc.org. Those are the two best ways to get a hold of us. Or you can stop in between the hours of 9 and 5, Monday through Friday, right there at 3442 Kiesel Road, right here in Bay City. So yeah, that's the best way to get a hold of us. And I want to say one thing too. I just want to thank the community for their continued support of River Jordan since we've been open. We are community funded. We've been awarded some small grants, but it's really the community coming together and supporting us, especially financially. That helps us keep going, because operations grants are very, very hard to come by. They're not really out there. So we depend on the community for those things, showing up at spaghetti dinners and my table events and fundraisers. Those are all very helpful to us. And I just want to thank the whole community for that.
Awesome. Well, from the community to you, Ayland, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. Looking forward to seeing much more work coming from you. And if you're listening at home, please do not hesitate to reach out and support River Jordan in any way that you feel possible, whether it's with time, talents, treasures, however you want to define that. Man, what a great opportunity for us to help folks in our community through the gift you've given them through River Jordan Ayland. So thank you again so much. An absolute pleasure, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Man.
Was that good?
I was ready to just clock out for the rest of the day.